Do not put this enchantment on your shovel. And here's why you should use barrels instead of chests. And these are 67 Minecraft things that could be harmful. And hey, as you can see from this number, we're getting painfully close to 6 million subscribers. So if you see a button below, consider subscribing. It's free, and it helps out a ton. Now, an Efficiency 5 netherite shovel seems great, but it's actually a ripoff. Since, as it turns out, having an Efficiency 4 enchantment is already good enough to instant mine every shovelable block. So if you waste the time to get yourself up to Efficiency 5, you're just going for style points. But honestly, I'm even guilty of this myself. It just looks awkward to have yourself an Efficiency 4 right next to all your other Efficiency 5 tools. But even if it's understandable, it still could be recklessly expensive to do. Villager trades can be a ripoff, but this one quite literally is. Since in the past, there used to be a glitch where old villagers could sometimes require more than 64 emeralds for a trade. And not only is it expensive, but it's also impossible, since you can only put up a stack of emeralds in the item slot. With the 1.19 update, we've got ourselves the new Recovery Compass item. And if you're able to track down the echo shards necessary to make one of these, it seems like a pretty useful item to have, unless you're inside of hardcore mode. Since obviously if you die here, there's no need to get pointed back to your last death, since at that point, the world's deleted and you can just move on. Now, this armor might look overpowered, but it's actually not that much. Since even though back in 1.14, you could get yourself a full set of armor with every single protection enchantment, that was actually unnecessary, since the level of protection for certain damage types is already capped. So even if you went through the effort of getting every single protection put on your armor, you weren't even seeing the full benefits of it. And at the very least, let's hope that when you were putting all those enchantments on, you added on mending as well. Because otherwise, I think you're gonna get the too expensive message in the anvil, and then it's a lost cause. Now, a netherite beacon is a huge flex, but when you crunch the numbers, you might want to reconsider that. Since to get all the materials necessary to pull off a full netherite beacon, you would need 5,904 netherite scraps. Which sure enough means you're gonna have to find 5,904 ancient debris blocks, and I just can't account for that kind of luck. So if you're Wadsy and want to do this for a thumbnail, that's completely fine, but for a regular person like you and me, I don't think that's gonna cut it. And when it finally comes time for you to activate that netherite beacon, the cost can only get higher. Since while most of us would choose to activate this with iron or gold, clearly those aren't the only ways to do it. And really, if you're spending a netherite ingot or a diamond to get one of these powered up, better make sure that you have someone watching, because otherwise you're just spending money for no one's benefit. Well, you might notice that only big spenders are building their nether portals with the 4 corners, since as we all know, it's unnecessary. I mean, even the Yogscast taught us that. Plus, it's not like obsidian can be easily farmed anyway, so if you're doing this, you're really just wasting time in 2 different ways, both in mining the obsidian and in spending the extra time to lay out those 4 blocks. So really, the only time you should see a nether portal built in this layout should be when you go through the nether and it generates over there. But in any other case, I'd recommend putting that 4 extra obsidian into an enchanted table or something. There's a lot of arguments about what's the best fuel to use in a furnace, but I can safely say this is the worst. Since while it doesn't look that bad to put your jukebox in as a furnace fuel, consider the underlying cost. Since for each one of these jukeboxes, you're spending 1 diamond inside. And there you go, just by putting a jukebox in the furnace, you're literally burning money. And I doubt you can recoup that cost by selling whatever steak you cooked in that furnace. Nether gold has gained a lot of popularity for its use in piglin bartering. So if you're trying to round up some more cash to make it rain on Porky Pig, then this is definitely the best way to go about it. You see, when you mine nether gold ore with a fortune pickaxe, you're just gonna get a handful of nuggets. Instead, you should always use silk touch on this ore and then smelt the ore down for a single ingot. So you can just trade this directly to the piglins and walk away with your rewards. Simple as that. As you can plainly see, even if you've got a cauldron filled up to the brim with water, it'll never break your fall. Which, if that was the case and you were only able to break your fall in full water source blocks, fine. So tell me, why am I able to fall on this chest or puddle and save my legs, but to fall into more water in this cauldron? No luck. Every now and then, Mojang will add in an item, but then it just flies under the radar because it doesn't get used. And for my money, I gotta say that one of those is rabbit stew. Because after all, if you take all of the different ingredients that it takes to make a rabbit stew and just eat them separately, it will fill up more hunger than the rabbit stew does altogether. So either Mojang needs to change it so that these stews have a bit more going for them, or they're just gonna stay at the bottom of the eating bin. If you want to play Minecraft survival without the added challenge of, well, surviving, then peaceful mode is an obvious choice. Or so you thought. You see, even though this mode claims to remove all dangerous mobs, one spy seems to have slipped through the cracks. While playing on peaceful mode, the llama is the only mob capable of harming the player. I mean, I know spit is gross, but is it really that bad to be the only damaging thing in the mode? Well, luckily, these animals only attack when they're provoked. So in the meantime, maybe just stick to the truly passive cows for your leather, alright? Turtle eggs are perhaps the most fragile thing in Minecraft. Truly, just about anything can trample these, whether that's us, baby zombies, or even bees. Yeah, That's right, bees. Now, I get that these bees are pretty chubby by most standards, but I thought their wings would make them a little lighter on their feet. But apparently, according to Mojang, mixing your honey and scute farms together isn't gonna happen anytime soon. Which, when you say that out loud, that part makes sense. You see, if you've got a smelting setup where you're smelting more than a stack of items at a time, probably through use of a hopper, then it turns out that crafting 9 coal into a block of coal will actually give you more burning power than just using 9 coal separately. You see, when you craft it into a block, now it does the equivalent of 10 coal smelts. Meaning that for big smelting jobs, it's the way to go. But if you're just doing a few items here and there, then it's really just best to use regular coal split up. Now, it's common sense that if you're on fire, water is the cure-all solution. I mean, even cauldrons uphold that fact. They aren't exactly for consistency. But if we all know that to be true, then I ask, how in the world does this work? As it happens, if you're on fire in a boat, you're able to submerge yourself in water and still burn the same. Stranger still is that you're still able to drown in that very water, even if it doesn't put you out. And folks, that's the definition of a lose-lose situation. This is one I'm personally guilty of, and lately I've been trying to cut back. You see, even though chests are a staple of Minecraft storage, as it turns out, in most cases, they might not be the best option. As it stands, most of the time, barrels are just a much better option to use. They're more efficient for resources, and more importantly, they're gonna save you from a ton of lag down the road. Basically, whenever possible, chuck out the chest and just stick to barrels for your options. Say you're placing the blocks as a foundation for your new house, laying them out in a row, only to have your flow interrupted by a measly flower. Since tulips, unlike the neighboring grass, have their own persistent hitbox, meaning we can't just place our blocks as we please, which means most of the time we see these, they're just gonna be a roadblock to your building flow. When building in Minecraft, stairs can be a great item to use to add depth to your bases. So if you're making a lot of them and you're using a crafting table, you're doing it wrong. This one mostly applies to people who've been playing Minecraft since before the stone cutter was added in, because as soon as you see how many blocks this can save you when applicable, there really is no reason not to use this thing. And when you're crafting as many stairs as I do, it really does add up, so I'm glad to take my discounts when I can. Laying out a redstone contraption can be tough work. And nothing kills the pride of putting in all that hard work just to have it be broken because you placed it on a regular ground block. You see, if you're doing your redstone on a naturally occurring block, then it's just going to be a recipe for confusion. So instead, just color code your contraption, which in turn makes the redstone even easier to fix, as now you can just look at one part instead of the whole thing. Stop building your crop farms like this, but instead, you gotta do it like this. And that's not just personal preference, but it's actually coded into the game where the crops grow faster if they're planted in rows. So to fix this problem, what you should be doing in your farms is either alternating your crop rows, or leaving about one block of space in between. And no joke, because of this secret feature, you'll see an immense increase to your growth speed. And when you go to replant your next harvest, you'll want to keep that in mind. Accidentally crafting something is a bad time that we've all been through, because when you mistakenly craft another chest plate for your friend, that's a lot of value that you just washed down the drain. Now sure, you could smelt it in your furnace for a return, but folks, that's a ripoff in its own way. A full durability iron or gold chest plate, which costs 72 nuggets to craft, reduces down to only one in a furnace. And I'm familiar with a margin of error, but that just seems ridiculous. And it's definitely not worth the attempt. Everyone knows that when you start up a new world, the wooden tools that you make at the beginning are quickly going to be outclassed. And while that's to be expected, you shouldn't just throw away those duds as soon as they're done for. You see, when you're starting out, any resources that you have are a hot commodity. If you're not using your mostly broken wooden tools to smelt up other things in a furnace, then you're doing it wrong. And plus, it's a bit more of a sentimental send-off than just throwing the things into a ditch. When you're getting ready to start a big project, most of us like to have little tiny base camps that we can refer back to. Most of the time, there's nothing too complex going on here. We got temporary storage and crafting setups and the like. But a key reminder to everyone who does this, as soon as you're done with the project, remember to take those out. Trust me, nothing quite takes away from the sight of your cool new build like having to see a little toolkit left around. Before you start out building that perfect nether hub for you and your friends, you gotta keep something in mind, which is, as nice as it might look to use all the different blocks and wood types that you're expecting to from the overworld, don't get ahead of yourself, because that nearby ghast might just have a few things to say about that new hub. Really, if you're building in the nether, you should always use blast-resistant blocks. If you're planning on naming your tools, do not do it after applying any enchanted books. Since it's laid out in this example, every time that you go to name your tool after you've taken it up a couple levels, it's gonna get much more expensive to do. And that'll in turn bring up the entire enchantment cost of the whole tool, which is something we want to avoid entirely. So come up with a name before you do the step one, otherwise you're just wasting experience. Some things sound cooler in theory than they are in execution. And I hate to say it, but I think Frostwalker's in that bunch. Don't get me wrong, when it works and you're sprinting in time with the ice, it's great. But all it takes is one jump or or a bit of hesitation, and then that whole rhythm is doomed. Sure enough, once you're in the water, there's no way to reactivate the enchantment without finding another shoreline. And if you ask me, that grievance keeps this enchantment from being the real staple it could be. A long-standing tradition of Minecraft is you can actually craft 9 of a different material into a bigger block. And for that reason, it's always a surprise to me that we can't do that with a nether wart block. Lord knows that I can take 9 of these and actually craft them into a nether wart block, so why can't I undo the process? Way too many times putting a nether wart block in a crafting table and getting surprised as to why I don't get my nether wart back. And I've got a feeling I'm not the only one who does that. Few things in Minecraft are quite as much of an eyesore as a creeper hole. Look, it happens. Sometimes when you're fighting that creeper, it's just gotta explode. But even though that's a completely understandable mistake, you don't need to go leaving around the evidence everywhere. Everyone who's played on a multiplayer server knows one person who doesn't take the time to fill in creeper holes, or worse, doesn't even fill them in correctly. Just clean up the job and don't let the creepers get the best of your world. If you enchant like this, you're doing it wrong. Because as Nembon lays out, there's a way to properly use an anvil to allow us to apply more than 30 enchantments to an item. And considering there aren't 30 enchantments in the game, this basically means that we can get any enchantment that you want onto that one item without ever seeing the too expensive screen show up. And the reason for this basically comes down to a different point system that gives different values to different enchantments. But if I were to list them out for every enchantment right here, we'd be here all day. So I'd recommend checking out Nembon's video to see more about how the details are done. Because while it might take a learning curve to figure out, as soon as you've got it, your tools are about to get a lot more powerful, and more importantly, you'll still be able to repair them. Villages can be one of the most helpful resources in Minecraft, which is all the more reason that you should never be hanging around one without sleeping. I don't care if most of the time it turns out alright, because every time that you hit midnight, you have a 10% chance of spawning a zombie siege. And folks, it only takes one of those to completely ruin your population. Really, let's be honest, there's beds everywhere in a village. If you're not using one of those to sleep, then you just gotta get out of town. Wither skeletons are generally scary to come across. So just imagine if one of these had the range of the overworld cousin. Well, apparently that's a lot more fact than fiction. If you actually give a wither skeleton a bow, not only does it beef up the attack area, but it also gives it fire arrows to shoot. And in retrospect, it's probably for the best that Mojang didn't give them a bow from the beginning. The last thing the Nether Fortress needs is another flame shooter. While Mojang works to bring Java features over to the Bedrock edition, one notable exception so far is the lack of a hardcore mode in Bedrock, which seems disappointing until you realize Bedrock's tendency for random fall damage bugs. Cases like this, where the player just seemingly dies out of nowhere with no rhyme or reason. And it only takes one look towards something like Reddit to see just how much this annoys the community. So while hardcore in Bedrock would be a welcome addition, if your world can end just like that, we've got a problem. Look, when you're playing in harder difficulties, then a lot of times spawners seem like more trouble than they're worth. But then the problem becomes after I've gone through all of that, when I want to actually make a farm, I have to go find a new spawner. Even though in the moment it might be a hassle to go in and deactivate one of these spawners on the spot, the EXP and items that you're going to get after the fact definitely make up for it. So in the future, let's just try to think about the long term and maybe use torches for these going forward. While most players know to use critical hits in PvP, they still can do a fair amount of damage when you're doing it just against mobs. For example, take this pillager mob. If we use a netherite sword normally, we can kill the thing in 3 hits. But if we use critical stabs instead, then we're getting the job done in 2. Just like that, you'll be saving yourself time and durability, which are both things I think we'd all love to have. Obsidian mining is a pain in its own right, but as anyone knows, if you're mining this by lava, there's even more opportunities for irritation. Say you take the time to mine out one of these cubes, only for some then newly exposed lava to flow and then burn that item right before you could grab it. It's a rude awakening, that's for sure. And while there are ways to mitigate the risk by using a water bucket, that doesn't bring back the one I lost to the fiery abyss. And all that wasted time is surely gonna sting as you mine the next one. This shovel's too fast, which sounds like a ridiculous problem to have, but it can actually come up in certain instances. Like say I have a stack of gravel in my offhand, and I'm trying to mine them with the shovel at the same time to get flint. But if my shovel has the efficiency to insta-mine, then it breaks the gravel before it lets me place down another block. But instead, by using a slower shovel here, we can just hold down both buttons and completely mine through the stack without interruption, proving that sure enough, slow and steady can't win the race. So Minecraft has its fair share of prickly blocks. Now when you're starting out, this makes sense, but when I got a full case of netherite armor on my body, I don't get why I'm still getting hit by thorns. Granted, I don't think the barrier here should be just as simple as wearing armor armor. For example, if I'm wearing a leather helmet, I should still get poked on the rest of my body. But if I've got diamonds on my chest, legs, and boots, I don't know why I'm getting hit as much. And it would make traveling through these forest biomes a whole lot less of a pain. Cauldrons are famous for not making a lot of sense, but this might take the cake. Because even though lava cauldrons behave mostly how you'd expect lava to react, it turns out they're a bit too good at it. Sure, they can burn players and items, but they are also capable of catching fire to usually lava-resistant mobs, like zombified piglins. And folks, that just blows my mind. Every feature that Minecraft adds to the cauldron is like a monkey's paw. Your wish might be granted, but not how you expect it. By themselves, villagers are an irritating mob, but when you try to move them, that frustration cranks up to 11. Since they can't be led around like pigs or cows, we need something like a boat to take them long distances. But using a boat in a village has its own problems. Namely, if you row the boat on top of a path block, you're out of luck. Since you can't row the boat upwards, that one pixel is all it takes to lock your boat to that path. And now you gotta break it and start all the way over. Potions of harming can do some real damage, but if you're making your set with a potion of healing, you might want to reconsider. You see, this potion can be brewed from either a potion of healing or one of poison. And if we compare the ingredients, the gold necessary for the glistering melon is much more useful elsewhere than the spider eye alternative. Since spider eyes are only useful for brewing, I think you'll be much happier to make your death potions this way and save those gold doubloons for a better investment. Item frames are an incredibly versatile block for decorations. And with the recent addition of glowing and invisible variants, there's even more of a reason to use item frames inside of your creative builds. But that only makes this problem all that more noticeable. Since when in creative, if you punch an item to get it out of a frame, much like you would in survival, it doesn't drop the item, but just deletes it instead. And that can be quite annoying and definitely unintuitive. So save us the hassle and just drop the item as is. Zombie gold farms are a huge help to have in Minecraft survival. But while the rest of the items that you get are easy to sort, you are going to get a lot of golden swords coming up into your chests. And after your first double chest full of broken golden swords, you're probably just wanting to trash the things. But not too fast, because it actually turns out that you can smelt the golden sword and get an extra nugget out of it. And sure enough, after a while, that extra gold is going to add up. If you're taking the time to fill up each of your water bottles using a cauldron, one water source will only fill up 3 bottles that it needs. But if instead you just take that water source out of the cauldron and place it nearby, then you can fill up an infinite amount of bottles from that. And when it costs 7 iron ingots to get even less return, I think it's safe to say that the cauldron's still a ripoff. When digging a staircase in Minecraft, I think a lot of us tend to think a little too short term. Because sure, mining a 2-block tall staircase on the way down to the mines is fine, but as soon as you try to get back up that staircase, you're going to hit your head on every single one of those ceiling blocks. You don't have to do anything fancy, just an extra block or two can make it way less painful to go down into your mines. Trust me, your noggin will thank you for it. Now I get it, math isn't on any of our priority lists, but sometimes when you manage to crunch the numbers, you can actually save yourself some resources. For example, if you're ever going about just smelting 1 log as fuel, you're doing it wrong. If you just turn that 1 log in a crafting table into 4 planks, now all of a sudden you're doing a 4 times return on what you would normally smelt. And plus, it's just fun to get quadruple the results for minimal effort. And anyone who's ever played around with a lot of mobs knows that having plenty of entities in a small area is going to cause a lot of lag. But the thing is, some of us are guilty of building with a lot of entities without even realizing that they're true entities. Like, I'll agree, it looks great to have your storage system with all of these different item frames. But if you've ever done one of those in actuality, then you know better than anyone else that those suckers cause so much lag in bulk. So use them a bit more sparingly, and the extra frames per second will be a definite reward. When you're playing Minecraft long enough, the misclicks are sure to happen. And while most of the time they're just no harm, no foul, if you're holding around an axe all the time, then you could cause some damage. I have a bad habit of doing this every time I try to open up a door with an axe. I'll always just hit the logs that are on either side of it. So to save yourself from this kind of embarrassing mistake in the future, just go around your world holding some other tool in your hand. And then you can just save your axe for when it's actually useful. Stockpiling the Eyes of Ender to both find and fix the end portal is a lot of work. And it'll definitely turn your day sour if you finally find that portal and you don't have enough eyes to actually fill it up. Which is why, folks, when you're on the search for the portal, you should never be constantly using the Eyes of Ender. Each time that you're casting one of those out, you're just rolling the dice that it's gonna break. Just stick to minimalism, and that'll really be all you need. It's safe to say that Minecraft is ripping you off. If we hop over to a crafting table and lay out the material for some trapdoors, you'll see that 6 planks breaks down into only 2 trapdoors, which, when compared to the 3 doors that we get from 6 planks placed vertically, is just embarrassing. Now, wood is by no means a precious resource, but any scam, no matter how small, is still gonna sting just a bit, and this is no different. If your copper looks like this, I can tell you why it's not oxidizing, since the way that it's coated, copper blocks need at least 4 blocks between them to oxidize at max speed, and if you have the blocks placed any closer together, it's gonna take much longer, especially if they're touching. So instead, a pattern like this is gonna be the quickest way to do it, helping you to build that Statue of Liberty replica and still get it finished within your own lifetime. When you first start up a Minecraft world, it's not hard to find trees as far as the eye can see. And while that feeling might make you think that you can get away with taking out a couple of them without replanting, it only takes a few repeats of that process before your base starts to look barren. Which is why, obviously, the best way to go about it is to be your team tree's self and replant every single tree that you chop down. And best yet, this is sure to keep you on Mother Nature's good side. When you start trying to work your way through the villager trading market, then you definitely gotta be looking out for this. Because sure, it's definitely cool to re-roll your villager constantly to try and get the best one. But if you don't convert the villager to a zombie and then change it back right after, then you're just wasting some good trades. If you're not looking to get the hero of the village effect all the time, this is definitely a way to save a couple of your emeralds on your next book. The Ender Dragon is a destructive boss. Truly, unless the block is native to the end, the odds are that it's getting destroyed. And while it makes sense that the dragon could break down your cobblestone tower, why are ender chests on that list? After all, they're made of obsidian, so the logic would figure these are pretty safe. But as you can see when we put these next to the dragon, that's just not true. But hey, at least if she breaks this chest, your items are still well and good up in the cloud. You see, while it is possible to shear a white sheep and then take its wool with a dye in the crafting table to craft a new colored wool, for that same one dye, you could change the wool color of another sheep, and now every single shear that you do is going to give you that new wool. All it takes is one round of shearing and you're already saving yourself some dye. Which, if you're not exactly full up on magenta or whatever, is definitely a helpful cause. If you've ever played on a server, then you know that some of the worst people to play with are the ones who treat multiplayer like they're playing on their single player world. What I mean by that is as you're building things in the world, you gotta be mindful of what other people are doing around you. So maybe don't protect your base with a lava moat if you're on a hill that pours that lava into your friend's backyard. And really, most of us play these games with our friends, so you don't want to be that kind of jerk to one of your buddies. I'm not saying kill your vision, but maybe just be a little bit more mindful. If you're doing something risky, do it away from the other builds in town. Because when you're operating as a free agent, then you could start to ruin a lot of fun, including yours if your friends start to leave. Lighting up caves while you're mining is obviously a good idea, but in specific situations, you might be placing your torches wrong. Because obviously, the worst scenario that we want to avoid is that you place your torches on the ground, you go to mine that diamond ore, and all of a sudden, all this water splashes into your face. Just like that, your torches are wiped clean, and now you can't see your way back up to the surface. Rather, if you place your torches on the walls, then you can avoid a lot of that same hassle. Stop using redstone dust in your builds, because the truth is that this is one of the laggiest redstone components in the game, especially when you continue to power it off and on. And in lieu of that, you'll find it much more efficient to use powered or activator rails instead, which, there you go, costs the same amount of redstone. And at least for that part, it should be an easy transition to make, as long as you got a gold farm. Here, we can use the 1 pixel of water on top of a waterlogged chest to not only save us from falls, but also allow for the Riptide enchantment. But with the cauldron, no chance. It's only good for extinguishing fire. And maybe it's just me, but I think that's rather pathetic. Stop using shears to collect your leaves, but instead, you should use a hoe. No joke, because in recent versions, the hoe has gotten a much bigger bump to how you can use it. And while it does cost some extra experience to get the silk touch on your hoe to do this, the trade-off is that you're going to get a much better durability than using some shears. And considering all the other blocks that we can break quickly by using this tool, I think that's more than enough reason to switch out your shears for a new side hoe. Fishing in Minecraft is a pastime that's sure to take a while. So if you're looking to save yourself some of that tedium, then you should never be fishing in a spot that doesn't allow for the rain bonus. As some of you might know, if you actually fish in a spot while it's raining in open air, then you're actually able to get a bit of extra points when you're fishing. So really, if you find yourself constantly casting a line down in the dark, then you should take your fishing rod, move it out into the open air, and expect to reap the rewards. Every now and then, you run a little low on a resource like clay, and now you gotta go dig at the bottom of a lake. And even though the amount that you need might be pretty small, you should never be digging underwater without an air pocket, or aqua affinity. Mining while you're submerged takes 5 times longer than doing it regularly, which is a significant difference, and if you're mining multiple blocks at a time, it really adds up fast. So if you don't have enough levels for aqua affinity, then at the very least, plot out the time to give yourself an air pocket. For a lot of us building in survival mode, mobs are the bane of our existence. And while most of the time we try to design around not getting any creepers into the institution, I think what you also gotta keep in mind is making sure that the walls are spider-proof. Because after all, if you just have a stubby barrier that allows any spiders to crawl into your fortress, it's not much of a fortress, is it? As most of us know, any good wall needs a couple of ledges and definitely height to keep the riffraff out. And better yet, it'll look so much nicer than just having some 2-block high cover around your base. I'm sure we've all heard from our parents time and time again to pick up after our mess. But who would have thought that advice would be so applicable in Minecraft? As you can see, if you leave around too many items in the ground, especially when you're mining in a cave, then all it takes is just one zombie to walk over, pick up an item, and now it's not going to despawn. This can become quite a large problem if you have this happening over and over again. Maybe just get rid of the item with a flint and steel. Now folks, it's a real pain in the brain when you're getting ready to start a big building project, you go and check your chests, and all of a sudden you're coming up short on things like stone and cobble. Now I'll fully admit they're not the most valuable materials in Minecraft. Far from it. But they're almost essential when it comes to these types of builds. So in the future, when you're branch mining or digging through with a haste 2 beacon, you might want to store a couple of these blocks. Whether you plant your sugarcane on dirt or sand, you're both wrong, since instead, you should be using mud. Odd as it sounds, the mud block is actually the best candidate for one particular reason. It's shorter than a full block size, which means that if we place hoppers underneath it, we get 100% collection efficiency. So every item that we break from our sugarcane farms can go right down to where they're supposed to be. And honestly, when the alternative is building one of these using hopper mine carts and a whole other set of hoppers, I think you'll find that just by using a few water bottles, you can get a much more efficient solution. The way that leveling up in Minecraft works is that it takes progressively more and more EXP to get to the next level. That's why, folks, there's very little reason to ever go too far past level 30. For one, like we said, a lot of that new XP is getting wasted the higher and higher that you're going. But it also means that after you die, you could lose all of those levels for nothing. And since Minecraft anvils have a level limit, then it seems like even Mojang doesn't want you to go too high over that cap. Just hit level 30 and cash out. Brewing up potions can sometimes feel like a chore. However, there are some situations where you just gotta bring one of these pals along. For example, if you're someone who in the overworld always carries around a water bucket in their hotbar, then when you go to the nether, you should always change that out for a fire resistance potion. Knowing what potion to bring in when can be a huge help when you're going around your Minecraft world. And more importantly so, it can get you out of danger when you need to. And with that folks, YouTube thinks that you might like this video, so see if they're right and have a good one, alright?